I'm Roby with Talk Business and Politics. Welcome to our first midweek edition of our Talk Politics Roundtable, a roundup discussion of some percolating issues at the state capitol during the current legislative session. I'm joined today by Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times, KATV's lead Capitol reporter Janelle Lilley, and Clint Reed, consultant with Impact Management Group. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate you. Here's the format. Everybody brings a question to the table. You get to moderate your own question.
And boxing gloves.
And boxing gloves if you want to. And Janelle, you get to go first.
All right. Well, everyone's talking about the big speech tomorrow, right? And what I want to know from you guys is where did we stand on the private option at the end of the speech? Is it going to be a modification, or is it going to be an announced wind down of the thing? Or is there another option that I haven't thought about yet?
You're first, Max.
Max?
Am I supposed to answer that?
Yeah, you are.
Oh, well, number one, there's no doubt that Asa Hutchinson keeps the private option. He won't call it that. He has to have the money to balance his budget. That's a given. The ungiven part is what he does and what he adds on. There's going to be a work training requirement at a minimum. Maybe they'll even try and become the first state to get federal approval, which they won't get of a work requirement. I think what he is going to do to make it different is he's going to talk about going after Medicaid. Not just the private option, but saying we're spending $5 billion on Medicaid, we're wasting money there, we need to look at behavioral health, we need to look at we need to reshape the whole way we look at our health system, not just the private option. And that's how he'll sell growing government through the private option, is saying I'm going to cut other parts.
But you don't think an announced wind down? Not at all.
He might say he's open to that.
I think he's got to do something that throws a bone to the right flank of the party over there. I think he's got to find something that pulls at least some somewhat moderate Tea Party Republicans that are up there. There are some that will be immovable.
Yeah, I said this
but
off
you got to
camera.
get a couple of them.
I said this off camera. One thing I've learned is you never get ahead of sitting governor on a major policy speech. But one of the things I would be looking for is a date certain to end, the private option. Has that been talked about? Sure, it has been talked about. Is that going to be a part of it? They're being very tight-lipped, so we'll wait and see. But to me at this point, we'll let Asa make his plans know, and we'll know a lot more tomorrow.
I think it gets a new name, though. I think that the name, the private option, goes by the.
They'll come up with a new brand.
Metro.
All right. Did you get your question answered?
I got it.
You got enough of that? All right, Max
Brantley,
Brantley, you get to shoot
Well,
second.
I want to inject the topic just to be different, not to some of the same old stuff. And I say it's time to jumpstart the discussion about merit selection of judges. Stop electing them. We've had one judge said he took a bribe in the form of campaign contributions. We were awash in dark money in the judicial elections. Isn't it time to talk about judicial ethics?
It doesn't really matter. That's the other thing. I'm with you as far as accountability and holding our judges accountable, but whether or not they're taking bribes from, a campaign donation or maybe making promises to someone who appoints them, is there really going to ever be the accountability that you're looking for in judges?
I think you've got a long history of the judicial election system working very well. And to me, I'm not sure you throw the baby out with the bathwater just because.
And your evidence of how it's worked well is?
Well, look, you've got a very diverse Supreme Court up there right now. I'm not hearing anybody all across the state talk about how bad our judicial system is. So I know it's
you need to read more publications.
Well, and trickle it down, though. I mean, there's hundreds of judges across the state,
That's right.
and they don't make the paper other than just their court rulings there. But I will say this, I've always thought when they took the party labels away from judges, Republican and Democrat made them independent, I never heard anybody complain about the party affiliation. It was the money was always got to me.
There's been a sea change in the campaigns within the last 5 years, now, with one or two narrow exceptions. But $500,000 from a group we don't know, for money where we don't know it's come from, running ads of questionable veracity in Supreme Court races, that's new, and the indication is we're going to be seeing more of that, and that just corrupts the system.
I think you've got a beef with the issue, and I respect that, and you've got a huge bullhorn that you like to talk about it through. But I'm not sure that at the end of the day, it's not that big of a policy issue out there.
I would say at the end of the day, though, if you went to merit selection of judges, you would still get very good judges on the court. I don't think it would increase the professionalism of the judiciary, and I think you'd still get very well qualified
I think
people.
it's an accountability issue. It's an appearance issue. Judges not only are supposed to be impartial, they're supposed to appear to be impartial, and the influence of money, the obvious influence of money in their campaigns, raises the impartiality
Max, I
question.
disagree with you a little bit because the accountability issue always comes back to the people, and the people have a long history of making the right choice. And if you give them time, you do your job, I do my job. We all have that
What if
accountability
they
factor.
gave money to a governor who was responsible for appointing them, and there was that corruption of money in that respect?
Absolutely, that chain will be raised, and that's a possibility. But I think the record on merit selection in other states, I go from Justice Robert Brown, who's nobody's liberal and nobody's fool, and he's a retired justice who's been one of the leading advocates for this, as has David Stewart, who used to head the Judicial Discipline and Disability Commission. They've written eloquently on it. I think they make a good case.
You still wanting to go to law school now?
Absolutely.
Become a judge? All right.
No, I'd
Clint,
be
you
a
get to
terrible
ask the
judge.
question.
Yeah, we talk a lot about education and tax cuts and Medicaid reform, but I'm curious, what are the niche issues that we're not talking about? You hear a lot about advanced energy. What are some of the things that the inside baseball people that are watching this care about and may want to look for in the legislative session?
Actually, a lot of those, I've been talking to some people, and they're like, they're still in the works, that we haven't introduced it, we haven't even finished writing the bill yet, and there's a lot coming down the pipeline, is what I keep hearing over and over and over again. I'm anxious to see what those bills actually look like. I'm actually anxious to talk about the lottery more. I mean, it was a topic, and then all the other stuff kind of pushed it to the side, but I am anxious to see how that goes forward. And of course, there are some other hot button issues that are, percolating to the top, but it's pretty early on, and they have a lot of time left to file some bills.
Well, something that plays out as a niche issue in the natural state, ironically, is the environment. That's a battle that is waged almost entirely in technical terms by highly paid lobbyists against some few committed advocates on the green side. This administration talks about the evils of government regulation. We already have a state that's not particularly known for being aggressively regulatory to begin with. We've got a guy who works in the wastewater industry sitting in the House of Representatives introducing bills that affects his business, and this goes on and on and on. I don't think the environment has a real champion. It's going to be interesting to see how tough Asa Hutchinson is on the hog farm, for example, in the Buffalo River watershed. Will he put money into continuing to study whether or not that is polluting the watershed?
I think an issue that hadn't been brought up yet, except by Asa Hutchinson, he mentioned it in a detailed conversation with reporters about a week before the session started, elections and election reform. I think raising the contribution limits for individuals to give now that the corporate contributions are limited.
He's a longtime believer that money is speech and that we ought to basically, he's all for reporting it, but
I think we'll see some other election-related bills that will come just with people that have pet issues and stuff like that, and I think they'll garner some headlines. All right, I get to ask the last question.
Fire away.
We've missed away on the story of the last 24 hours here. Do we need a Robert E. Lee birthday in the state of Arkansas?
No, I vote no. But we're one of 3 southern states. I think it brands you as troglodytic politically, and we ought to do away with it. We ought to honor King, and Lee will not be forgotten. But the Civil War was over, and a lot of people here don't understand, but the Union won.
I agree with Max. Right before
By the way, can I say Nate Bell and I agree on
Well,
this issue?
that's what I was about to point out. I saw where Warwick Saban signed on to be a co-sponsor of Nate Bell's bill, which tells you a lot about the cooperation.
Fred Love is also
It tells you a lot about the cooperative spirit at the legislature. But no, I think it sends a bad signal. It's not something we should be doing.
Yeah, the day is extremely inconvenient. And, I think that I grew up in a southern state in North Carolina and was certainly taught
barely southern.
history. Well, you wouldn't know that the way they talk. The first state to secede is how they like to brand it. So it was certainly something that we talked a lot about in the history of Robert E. Lee. So, I mean, I think you're still going to get the education of who he was and his importance just to that idea of Virginia and the cause. And so
I just think symbolically putting them on the same day.
yeah,
is
I agree with you.
bad
It's just
PR, so
bad.
Keep it,
looks
but
bad.
move it to another day and do whatever you want. Don't
Yeah.
close the
And
state for
a
it.
great move for the Republicans, by the way. I mean, that could use some diversity to say they were the ones that changed this. I mean, it's a political winner for them.
I got to give some props to Jason Talbert, our blogger at Top Business
He did.
Politics. He stirred the nest on this one, so I'll give him some props on that. All right, we're out of time. This was fun. Max Brantley, Janelle Lilley, Clint Reed, come back sometime. We'll do it again. Bring your knives. No, there was no blood,
Stop
no
sticking
foul.
me in between them, Roby.
Yeah.
I
Wait
feel
till
like
the
you're
cameras
not,
turn off.
you're not concerned for my health
All
here.
right, you can catch the post show after this. All right, we will be back for more on this midweek conversation every Wednesday afternoon. We'll be putting this online on KATV.com or talkbusiness.net. Thank you for tuning in.